At AOL on Sessions or something.
Check it out here on Sessions at AOL.
I knew it. Something like on Sessions. Hey, what's up? This is your girl, Ciara. Check it out here on Sessions. Oh. I'm like, well, something wrong.
You thought you had crazy eyes.
Oh, man. She scared me. Before I was doing everything, I was dancing. I was doing modeling. I always wanted to be an entertainer. I just didn't know in what capacity. I remember this day vividly. I was sitting down watching Destiny's Child perform on Good Morning America. And beforehand, I had wrote down on the paper, it was a goal sheet. I was like, what am I going to do in my life? And I was in the 10th grade this time, and I was actually 14 years old, 14 going on 15. And I felt as if I was on that stage, and those fans were screaming for me. And I was just like, I could see myself there. So I got tears coming out my eyes. I got goosebumps. I really believe it was God talking to me, for real. And I say, that was the affirmation. That was me saying, I'm going to do it. And then that's where everything started.
2006 is one of my all-time favorite years in music. Granted, I was only 10 at the time. I look back on this year so fondly. It was a peak year for mid-2000s music, honestly. You had Beyonce's B-Day, you had Justin Timberlake's Future Sex Love Sound, Gwen Stefani's The Sweet Escape, Fergie's absolute classic The Duchess, Amy Winehouse's Back to Black, Nelly Furtado's Loose, just to name a few. But at the tail end of the year, a certain princess of Crunk and B dropped her second and to date her most ambitious project, Ciara's criminally underrated The Evolution. I've always loved Ciara, but only real ones remember her domination from 2004 to roughly 2007. Sure, it sounds insane to say that Ciara was commercially on the same footing as Beyonce at one point and outselling Rihanna by a wide margin, but that really was the case, even if it may have been for a brief period. But it was fun period regardless. And of course I don't say these things to pit her against those other two women. If you know me, you know I love everybody, but I am very aware that time can distort things. It's easy to say that Ciara was never great, since we know Beyonce and Rihanna to be legends now, but you have to remember that in 2004, Beyonce had only one studio album out and Rihanna hadn't even debuted yet. At the time, the rise of crunk and the hybrid sound later named crunk and B music, a subgenre of southern hip-hop, was gaining traction in the mainstream very, very quickly. But it was a very male-dominated genre. 3 6 Mafia and Lil Jon were pioneers of the style, and through their collaborations with other artists, the sound spread at a rather rapid pace. Lil Jon in particular was arguably the sole reason for the sound's rise to prominence as he became the face of crunk music in the mid-2000s.
My single is called Goodies. It's produced by Lil Jon. It's a song that I co-wrote with him. It's co-wrote as well. And basically, it's a female empowerment record, and it talks about things I think, a situation that I think all women go through, like when you're at a party, you're at a club, or you're at the mall, wherever it may be, and a guy pulls up in a Benz or a Bentley, a Rolls Royce, and he's got the bling bling and stuff. And then my whole message is that it's not about that. Just because you have those things doesn't mean that I'm going to leave with you, doesn't mean I'm going to give you my number, and it doesn't mean that you necessarily have a chance. So.
In early 2004, Ciara wrote a demo with record producer Sean Garrett, who co-wrote the massively successful Yeah for Usher. Lil Jon, who also produced and was featured on Yeah, began to work on the record as well. Ciara decided to use the song to go against the norm and deliver lyrics in contrast to the usual female promiscuity and overt sexuality that were delivered by fellow female artists. While on the surface the song appears to be another overly sexual one, it actually turned out to be about her refusal to give it up for her pursuer. Called the female counterpart to Usher's Yeah and fellow crunk hit Freak a Leak by P.D. Pablo, the song was originally titled Cookies, but was officially released as Ciara's debut single Goodies on June 8, 2004. Featuring verses from P.D. Pablo, the final product was an infectiously booty-popping anthem carried by Ciara's sexy, breathy vocals. Goodies was a success, peaking at #1 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100 for 7 weeks, becoming the longest-running #1 debut single by a female artist on the chart since 1977. Overall, the song earned Ciara the title of Princess of Crunk and B and made her one of the few female artists at the time to garner a significant amount of success from the genre. The creation of Goodies would ultimately frame and drive the direction of Ciara's debut studio album of the same name, which was released that same year on September 28, 2004. Goodies, the album, became a top 10 record in the US for Ciara, peaking at #3 and earned her altogether a #1 single with the title track and 2 more top 10s with 1 2 Step and Oh, both of which peaked at #2. While critics at the time were mixed, as they usually are, the appeal of Ciara was evident from the very beginning. She filled a void in the industry that no one was really aware was there until she arrived. While at first glance you'd see another R&B girl, Ciara wore many hats that secured her a unique spot in the music scene at the time. With her airy vocals and electrifying choreography, Ciara occupied a vacancy still felt by the untimely passing of Aaliyah, who had tragically passed just 3 years prior at the time. And along with that, she was touted as a Janet Jackson for younger audiences, although it's worth noting that Janet was still very much active at the time. Her unfortunate Super Bowl incident that same year effectively saw her unfairly blacklisted from the industry. Add in the fact that crunk music was a mostly male-dominated and rough genre, Ciara softened it just enough for the masses and added a new kind of style to it. All in all, Ciara arrived at just the perfect time, and with her debut album setting a great foundation for her career, she would continue to push herself with her next album. The Evolution was an absolute obsession of mine upon its release. Growing up, as I grew more aware of the music industry, one thing that always caught my eye, even at a young age, was how artists switched up their looks and overall vibes at the onset of a new era. It continues to be one of my favorite traits of the music industry. Ciara's transition from Goodies to The Evolution was one of the very first times I remember watching an artist transition from one era to the next. The image of Ciara during her debut was very much projected as the pretty girl from up the street. Her image and style were more urban and casual, as opposed to the more glamorous looks of fellow girls like Beyonce and Ashanti. In a lot of ways, it could be inferred that the way Ciara was presented during the Goodies era gave her an edge over her peers by having relatability. But upon her move into her sophomore era, her style became more elevated and mature. The most striking thing to me was her change in hair color, from the youthful, vibrant caramel brown to the mature, self-assured black. Change in hair was always a big flag for me that an artist was about to move into a different era. I remember a time when a new Rihanna hairstyle meant a new album was on the way. Musically, Ciara referred to The Evolution as Goodies to the 10th power, which is concisely what it is. The Evolution takes Goodies and elevates it in many ways. It walks a very careful line of doing enough to separate itself from its predecessor while not straying too far from what made Ciara, Ciara.
I'm feeling real good right now. The Evolution is in store, so it's truly a rush right now. I'm very, very excited about it.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that. The album's in stores. It's called Evolution. Now, how have you evolved?
I've evolved in so many different ways as an artist and as a woman, and there's little subtitles that I use: the evolution of dance, evolution of fashion, evolution of my music. I've evolved in so many different ways, and it's like you basically can say it's a symbol. It symbolizes growth. It's just everything is truly growing, and to me it's just getting bigger and bigger and better for me. That's a part of the evolution. That's what makes the evolution. So that's why I felt the title was perfect for my album right now.
The world's first taste of the new Ciara would come on July 25, 2006 with the release of the song Get Up featuring Chameleonaire. The song had the distinction of being the lead single from not only Ciara's second studio album, but also the lead from the soundtrack to the 2006 movie Step Up starring Channing Tatum. One of Ciara's most criminally underrated records by far, Get Up serves as a sleeker, more forward-sounding counterpart to 1-2 Step, driving home exactly what Ciara's second album was supposed to be, a natural evolution of Goodies. Get Up peaked at number 7 in the United States, giving Ciara her 7th top 10 hit in just 2 years at that point. The song may have peaked at 7, but it went number 1 and 10 times diamond on my CD player and in my parents' car because I had this on heavy rotation. And speaking of heavy rotation, I distinctly remember the song's music video being in heavy rotation on BET and MTV as well. One of Ciara's best visuals, if not the best, the video shows Ciara donning her new black hair and accompanied with several special effects. The entire visual is very forward-thinking and futuristic, very much a darker and sleeker version of Janet's 2001 All For You video in many ways. And combined with Ciara's new look and new sound, Get Up was the perfect introduction to the evolution. The ultimate goal of Ciara's second album was first and foremost to show growth, hence its title, but that growth was not restricted to just her music. With the evolution, Ciara desired to showcase an evolution of the different sides of her artistry, such as dance, fashion, and herself as a person. In many ways, she was still that girl everyone first saw in the Goodies video, but in so many more ways she was not. And it is that balance that drives the Evolution's 18-song track list, which is separated into 5 sections, denoted by several interludes: the evolution of music, the evolution of dance, the evolution of fashion, and the evolution of C. The first section of the record has no interlude to introduce it, but it's a perfect way to pick up where we left off from Goodies. That's Right featuring Lil Jon starts things off in the most crunk way possible. The feeling of putting the CD in and hearing this for the first time is something I'll never forget. That's Right is Goodies to the 10th degree in the most blatant way possible. You cannot hear this song and not want to move. It's impossible. I was sure this one was going to be a hit, and it probably would have been, as it was meant to be the 5th and final single from the album, but its release was ultimately canceled. Like a Boy, the 3rd single from the Evolution, follows and is another one of Ciara's more popular singles, although it somehow only managed to peak at number 19. That's Right and Like a Boy were both relatively familiar sounds for Ciara, perfect to open the record with before it quickly moves into fresh territory. The second section of the record, The Evolution of Music, features songs with more forward and elevated production, and while a lot of them don't pull Ciara too far out of her comfort zone, the sounds are still a step ahead of what we got with Goodies. In this section, we have the album's 2nd and 4th singles, respectively, Promise and Can't Leave 'Em Alone, featuring 50 Cent. Promise, depending on who you ask, may or may not be considered the album's true lead, as Get Up was technically a soundtrack song, but regardless, the song was a clear indicator of the new aura of Ciara's sophomore era. One of my absolute favorite songs of all time, Promise represents the Evolution's theme of evolving and growth very well, as its production and lyrics were so far ahead of anything she'd done up until that point. Ciara's airy falsetto, accompanied by the dreamy and sexy production, make this undoubtedly a standout track in her entire discography. The song peaked at number 11, just shy of being another top 10 hit for Ciara, and is to date her best performing solo single with no accompanying artist. The album's 3rd section, The Evolution of Dance, features songs created with the intention of making you move. The 3 songs that make up this section are all club ready: Make It Last Forever, the underrated Bang It Up, and of course the aforementioned lead, Get Up. The Evolution of Fashion only has one song, the polarizing Get In, Fit In. You either hate this one or love it. Sure, it's corny, but it's fun and I love the song. Overall, the message of the song in this section is not being afraid to be yourself and pushing boundaries, particularly by how you present yourself through fashion. The album's closing section is The Evolution of C and features all the ballads found on the record save for one. Ciara ends the record on a somber yet reflective note. Here you'll find her at her most personal and vulnerable, but overall grateful and hopeful for her future at the time. Overall, The Evolution was a coming-of-age record for Ciara. Goodies was fun and carefree in its presentation, while The Evolution strove to present that same vibe, but add substance to it as well. The Evolution is quite honestly a perfect example of a well-executed sophomore album and era, taking what made one's debut special and pushing it forward naturally, evolving it, if you will. Pun completely intended. The Evolution gave the world more of what we loved about Ciara, while adding enough to not make it feel like a rehash. This album felt familiar and fresh simultaneously, and that's hard to do. I applaud Ciara for this album, and it's rightfully one of my favorite records of all time. The trajectory of Ciara's career at the time seemed fairly obvious. The Evolution was a number 1 album, something that Goodies didn't achieve. Ciara's exposure and popularity as an artist was at an all-time high. It seemed inevitable that her next releases would surely outdo The Evolution, but unfortunately this album would continue to be, to date, Ciara's only number 1 album. What came after The Evolution was a combination of many factors in and out of Ciara's control that would contribute to a not as stable and thriving music career as I feel she should have had, but that's another video for another day.